Hello, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Michelle. I'm a senior consultant here at Woodrow Mercer, and welcome to TA Talks. I'll pass over to my co-host Duncan, who will give a brief introduction with regards to what TA Talks is all about.
Hi, thanks, Michelle. So, and thanks very much to everyone for tuning in. So, this is one of the, I think, the fifth event that we've done maybe with TA Talks or something like that. So this edition is specialized around healthcare. So we basically got a panel here of some very, very experienced talent acquisition professionals within the healthcare market. So we're going to be going through, they're each going to be presenting a talk to hopefully help anyone out who might be looking for a new job at the moment, which is in, quite an unprecedented and competitive time. So hopefully the advice that these guys can give you can really help you stand out in a short list and everything like that. So Satbinder, if you could just introduce yourself first.
Hello, afternoon. So my name is Satbinder Sankera. I'm the Director of Corporate Services for Wells CCGs. So that covers the London boroughs of Newham, Tower Hamlet and Waltham Forest.
Fantastic. Andrew.
Hi, I'm Andrew Bott. I'm Director of Talent Acquisition for Medidata here in EMEA. Medidata is a software as a service platform exclusively focused on the world of clinical trials. So what that means is companies and large corporate pharmaceutical and CRO organizations will use our platform to record data and manage data and analyze data in relation to a clinical trial. We've got something like 6,000 clinical trials running on our platform globally right now. Interestingly, probably over 130 are COVID related, which helps bring our mission of powering smarter treatments, for healthier people very much to the fore, and sort of helps folk understand really what we're all about.
Fantastic, fantastic. And we also have Jade Lacey.
Hello, I'm Jade. I work at McKesson and specifically for Lloyd's Pharmacy, so looking after pharmacy from Birmingham all the way to Scotland and Northern Ireland. I cover pharmacists, pharmacy manager positions, as well as look after some other interesting aspects of our business here with healthcare. We have been really busy, as you can imagine, since March, with the need for pharmacists and healthcare partners more than ever. So hopefully you'll be able to get some useful information out of me during this conversation.
Fantastic. And Will, by no means last, but no means least.
Hi, my name's Will Marzullo, and I am the Vice President Head of Talent for Health IQ. We are a startup based in Silicon Valley in California, but operationalizing in Dallas, Texas. We earn our revenue through insurance sales by hiring agents, licensing and training agents, but it really funds our big data operations of finding misplaced risk in the insurance world. And our goal is to offer better insurance at a better price for healthy individuals.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So that's a really good kind of sweep of the healthcare market, if that is even possible, because it's so enormous. But yeah, that seems to be a really good sort of introduction. So thank you very much, everybody. So as mentioned, we are going to just jump on with each individual topic. So each of our guest speakers today will be presenting a topic, and then they will be hopefully able to kind of, comment and question on each other's and things like that as well, and just have a bit of an overall discussion. So if anyone watching does have any questions or anything like that, feel free to reach out. And if you're not watching this live, we are able to put people's individual contact details on there as well. So you can always just have a conversation following on afterwards. So I believe our first guest speaker of the day is Satvinder. So over to you.
So I'm going to talk about how the National Health Service, how recruitment works, and to also give you some kind of tips in terms of how to go about it, and try and kind of provide a bit of context as well, because there's an awful lot of changes going on, quite a difficult time for everyone. So I just want to kind of give you an idea about that kind of the bigger picture, as it were. So first and foremost, like everywhere else, I think recruitment has kind of pretty much dried up in the NHS at the moment, particularly at the more kind of senior levels. But in the conversations I've had with the recruitment consultants over the last few weeks, they can see the light at the end of the tunnel. So things are going to start picking up, and depending on basically the level of the role that you are seeking, you do need to kind of go to some kind of some sites that always have NHS jobs on them. So first and foremost, NHS Jobs. It's a website, should contain the vast majority of roles from down the country, and is a good place to kind of start. You can register on there, get alerts, and it'll give you access to pretty much everything in the country. It's likely that if the more higher graded jobs, most organisations will hire recruitment consultants. They're doing that more and more. It allows them to kind of target individuals. So if you are going for the more highly graded roles, then it is a good idea to get in touch with some particular kind of recruitment consultancies that specialise in the National Health Service. So I am thinking about particular organisations that like Hunters and Penna and Gatterby Sanderson. There are some well-known companies out there that do specialise and that the NHS will go to time and time again. The bigger context for you guys at the moment is that the NHS is going through quite a lot of change. Basically, a lot of the provider commissioner split that we've had in the NHS for quite a long time is being dismantled. We're moving to bigger kind of footprints, which means the creation of what's called STPs. Basically, they're health and care partnerships, essentially. And if for somewhere like London, for example, with a kind of population of over 8 million, there's 5 different STPs to represent the geographical areas. And then there's borough partnerships in each borough. So obviously in London, that would be like 32 to represent the 32 boroughs. What that means is that lots of people are kind of moving around the NHS, and functions are kind of being drilled down to kind of borough footprints, and others are kind of going upwards to the more kind of regional footprints. In essence, it's kind of restructuring of the NHS, and trying to get rid of some of the walls that have been created over probably the last kind of couple of decades. And that's going to mean a huge amount of movement, but it also means that potentially there's going to be quite a lot of jobs coming out of that. And once they've done the internal reorganisations, that should create vacancies and makes it much easier for people to be able to get a job. What I would say about the NHS is that it's like most public sector organisations, it is risk averse. It is much easier to get a job in the NHS if you are working in another health organisation. I've got to be honest and say that, particularly at the higher levels, that's undoubtedly going to be the case. But at the kind of lower levels, it's a different picture. I think NHS organisations will be far more open to recruiting people from outside of the kind of health sector, and that's where there's real opportunities. I don't think that's the case universally. I think some organisations are very forward-thinking and would be open to people outside the NHS, but it is few and far between you and me. So you do need to kind of think about that and exactly what entry level you are, what point you want to kind of enter the NHS. That's really important. The other thing about the NHS that's incredibly important is that it doesn't accept CVs. So the NHS, like many public sector organisations, consider themselves to be equal opportunities employers. What that means is that you will more or less every single occasion have to go through an application process. And that means submitting your details alongside your work history and your experience and your qualifications, but with a supporting statement. The supporting statement is probably the most important thing in terms of you being able to get to the next stage of the recruitment process. And that will be based on the person specification and the job description. So you really need to pay close attention to the person specification more than anything else. And where it says essential, you will need to be able to demonstrate that you have got the relevant skills or the relevant experience or the ability, but against that specification. Now, some organizations will literally ask you to go through every single point in the person specification and say something against each point in the specification. But most organizations will be a little bit more kind of understanding of how you've tried to capture maybe 2 or 3 linked points into the same paragraph. But I do urge you, more than anything else, to go through that person spec and highlight what are the key points they are looking for, and then base your supporting information on that. If like most jobs, if it says there is a person to contact that you can get further information from, do so, because it will give you a huge amount of insight in terms of where that organization is and what they are particularly looking for and what they are valuing in their recruitment. And that will give you a bit of a head start and advantage. I'm going to leave it at that point because I've been going for quite a long time and give my colleagues, but there'll be an opportunity, I suppose, to maybe add in a bit more in when we get to the questions.
Thank you very much, Satbinder. That was fantastic and a brilliant insight, to be honest. Even myself, I've recruited again for a number of years for the NHS but naturally more on the interim aspect of it, never with regards to the NHS jobs. And it's good to hear that just that process, because candidates will often speak to us and kind of go, I'm not sure what happens with some of the websites, it's like they're like doing the personal profiles and putting their CV out to the unknown, really, aren't they? So it's a good insight to know what then happens, or exactly what you've said, what to focus on a bit more.
When I do any recruitment, invariably, particularly at the kind of lower bands, I find that people will literally put in one sentence against the specification, and that will not get you an interview. Or they'll just simply submit their CV straight in the bin, won't even get considered. So, like I said, look at the person's specification and try and address each point, giving examples. That's quite important, giving examples of how you can show someone objectively that you are able to fulfill that particular criteria.
I'm curious, in the States, depending on the type of hospital network you work for and which, whether it's government or private, it sounds like when people apply to your positions, they must apply to each specific position they might be considering. It doesn't sound like you can just take a candidate off one job and place them against another one because you see the fit in it. They actually have to apply to it. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct.
Yeah, I think that's important for candidates to know when they think that they may just have gotten their application into an organization one time and, they'll find a way to use it somewhere and repurpose it. But in the States, it's the same way for OFCCP requirements on the government, that you must apply personally to each position that you must be considered, and we can't move candidates around. It makes it challenging on the recruiting side, but if candidates know this, then they're more open to applying to several different positions to increase their chances.
Satbinder, a question I had, one of the first things you said was, since lockdown, a lot of the recruitment has dried up. I mean, people might look at the NHS and think they should, given the workload and so on that they're under right now, they would be a strong tailwind of hiring in that organisation. So I was quite actually personally surprised to hear that, or is all resources being focused on the problem in hand, which is COVID, and hiring is like being paused.
Yes, I think it is. That's definitely happened at the beginning of the kind of COVID, pandemic. So I think that was a kind of reaction to people trying to kind of free up as much of the resource as possible to kind of deal with the pandemic. And there was obviously some concern that the NHS was simply going to be overrun, and therefore basically a number of kind of key functions were just paused temporarily. Might have been an overreaction, but I think that was kind of reflected the position at the time when there was a huge amount of concern about whether we were actually going to be able to cope with this pandemic. Obviously, as those fears have been allayed, I think now you will have a kind of 3 or 4 month window where quite a lot of recruitment should be taking place. I do expect it to kind of stop again in November, because I think that's when the expectation is that we will possibly have a second wave of the pandemic in November time, but also it coincides with the flu season as well. At that point, I can imagine organisations again thinking my number one priority is to deal with these 2 pandemics. So let's stop some of those other kind of functions, or maybe not prioritise them, and therefore things will go quieter again. So it'll happen. It's kind of it's happening in cycles at the moment, but I think starting from August right through till the end of October, I expect there to be a fair amount of recruitment taking place. So people should keep an eye on the various kind of websites, particularly NHS jobs, very closely to look at what's available.
Fantastic. Well, Satbinder, that was great. Really good insight into particularly things that I wasn't aware of, like the supporting statement, for example, how that's absolutely essential. And I think we'll probably touch on that again through other people's talks around the importance of cover letters and things like that, for example. But I think for now we should move on to Andrew's talk, if that's all good. So without much further ado, Andrew, take it away.
Thank you, Duncan. Perfect. So I'm going to sort of talk briefly about the type of roles that exist in an organization like Medidata, i.e. a software development company. I'm also going to talk a little bit about, I guess, hiring tips 101. Some of you will have heard them before, but no harm in repeating them, just in terms of my thoughts, and they are my thoughts on what will make an application and what will make an interview process successful for you. I'm going to, if you don't mind, Duncan, if I'm allowed to, I'm not sure whether I am, I'm going to share my screen very quickly. Can I do that?
You should be able to. Michelle, I think you might need to make Andrew the host, which I'm sure a lot of people during lockdown who are watching this have had this exact conversation a few times. Do you know how to do that? There we go. You're perfect. You should be able to do that now.
Okay, so I just want to I'll share this one. Share. Okay, can you guys all see that?
Yes.
Yep.
Awesome. So I just wanted to sort of break this down into very simple terms, for everybody, and also just quickly highlight from the off all the roles that are in blue do not necessarily require, previous healthcare or clinical trial or or NHS related experience. And really we're in 4 major buckets of technology. So technology is where we're building the product. We have software developers who are working with product managers, and product managers are working with the likes of GSK and Novartis and a whole range of CROs that are out there on what they need, you know, to kind of effectively manage their clinical trial technology platform. There's business analysts, there's project managers, there's software engineers, there's test engineers. It's a whole ecosystem of techs who are kind of front and center. So if you kind of want to be in an organization where tech is front and center, then Medidata is potentially a place for you. And really only when you get to the upper echelons and much more customer facing areas of product, in tech at least, would we probably be looking for some more some relevant experience. Obviously, once we've built it, we've got to sell it. So over on the right, we've got a range of sales folk. I've simplified this, quite a lot, but it's seniority down from the top there. We've got sort of big enterprise account directors who will be probably just working with one large pharmaceutical company, such as Novartis or Boehringer or somebody like that. A mid-market account director will probably be working with maybe 10 to 20 mid-sized biotechs or pharma organizations, and the partner account team will be the ones that are working with our contract research organization, customers and partners. So they really welcome previous experience of selling within life sciences, selling within healthcare, and the closer you can get to clinical trials, the better. Also, each sort of inside sales folk as well is a more junior level sales role where we can move people through and in who don't necessarily have previous experience. But the PS organization, professional services organization, is about delivering and making it happen on the ground. And implementing and configuring the application at the customer site and managing that drumbeat through project managers. And the customer success leans a little bit more towards support and how a customer can get the maximum from the Medidata platform. And that's a lot more, quite often is a lot more around that sort of customer-facing engagement work rather than necessarily knowing everything about clinical trials. Hence, we can take people there without clinical experience. And obviously, we have a range of central functions you can see on the right, which we're looking for your individual specialism and expertise there, which doesn't necessarily require previous healthcare experience. I wanted to sort of put that up there just to sort of encourage those who may be sitting outside healthcare right now or outside technology, can feel comfortable that we may be able to look at you. And I just want to talk a little bit about sort of my views on, on some top tips for job seekers. I'll quickly run through this super quick because I know I'm going to be against time here. CV, just please make it clear and concise for me. We obviously can accept a CV. I'm personally not so interested in a covering letter. Resist lengthy monologues and bios at the front of a CV that takes a whole page up and actually is not necessarily connected to anything. Put that in your, that sort of experience and what you're strong at. Put that in your achievements area. I do quite like, however, at the top of the CV, just maybe 6 or 7 bullet points of what you do represent. So for a senior director role, it could be a sort of 6 things that you're hanging your hat on, and they could probably be, related and should be related to the job that you're applying for. But don't give me a page and a half of what you've done in summary. This mostly goes out to the techs out there. Resist putting every application you've ever possibly looked at or spent an afternoon playing with on your CV just to capture search engine optimization. you'll get caught out. And if it's on your CV, be prepared to be cross-examined against that. And if you can't, then that's possibly going to count you out straight away. So be sensible and focus on what you are strong on. And a kind of a bit of a pet comment of mine around short tenures. A lot of hiring managers focus or over focus on this. So I'm kind of trying to find a way to help you deal with the reservation before it is a reservation. So one sentence at the end of a section on your CV that relates to, you know, maybe a short tenure in an organization, just simply explaining that may well make that reservation go away. Just looking at interviews, moving quickly on there, check out a post, you know, from Adam Starr, who's from Medidata. He wrote a really good article on this last week. But for me, point one on interviews is preparation. Align yourself to the business. Think about the business that you're applying to, its drivers and so on, and the culture. Show you how you've understood those. Prepare some questions. And prepare some questions they might ask you based on gaps in your CV. You know, knowing everything about the company is not expected, but core prep will leave you calm. And if you're calm, you'll give such a better interview you won't believe, and you'll be briefer with your answers. Point two, slightly counterintuitive, is listen. Okay, when you're supposed to thinking, you're supposed to be doing all the talking. That's not the case. Listen. Too many times I've had to listen to the answer the candidates want to give me and want to give the hiring manager, and keep qualifying your answer as you're going along. If you're all unsure or you're talking too much, or you feel you're talking too much. Next point, demonstrate some honesty, some humility, some self-awareness. You know, nobody's perfect, and be comfortable talking about where you got it wrong, because that's exactly where you'll have learned things in life. And I think it's such a key and essential trait to be successful in a business like ours, and be a leader in a business like ours, to have that self-awareness. So talk about it, show that you've got it. And the last point really on interviews in this format is sort of brevity. Yeah, kind of touched on it, but answer the question and stop. If you're still going after 60 seconds, press the pause button, look for an exit and go, am I answering this question? And that also gives you a time to breathe, because they'll then probably requalify the question or take you in another area. And it also, you know, allows you to you know, feel and look better prepared, because you'll be again going with probably shorter answers at that point. Some quick highlights from me on virtual interview. There's some obvious ones here around testing the application, avoid being backlit. I hope you can see me now, because I've got a window in front of me as opposed to behind me. Dress code. Check it out. Check out what you see on YouTube for the company, and what you see on videos or on the websites, and match that level of dress code, or perhaps take it up half a notch if you're worried, or if in doubt, ask the recruiter, ask me or the team. Naturally, trying to have a decent background, quiet and undisturbed, without the cat coming in and things like that, and try and engage the camera and smile, which all of a sudden I'm now trying to do instead of thinking too much, and overdo the animation, because it kind of brings you into the interview a little bit better. And going back to what I mentioned earlier, just keep checking and validating your answers on a video interview way more than you would probably in a face-to-face meeting, because it's way more difficult to read the room over video. And I think if you're checking in and throwing a question back at them, you'll get that engagement. You'll get that two-way conversation, which happens naturally in an interview room, but it's difficult, you know, when you're on this sort of soulless other side of a camera. So my top tips, lots of controversy in there potentially, because everyone has an opinion about how to write a CV, but I thought I'd share what I think and what works for us and what works for Medidata. And yeah, that's me. Questions?
Great, well done. That was that was fantastic. There was a lot of there's a lot of good points in there that I agree with, and it's nice to see sort of reiterated at the most senior levels of sort of enterprise organizations as well. So thank you for that. I guess from the outset, I have a couple of points myself, but if either of the guys wanted to jump on and ask questions.
I find it interesting and completely true that basically what Andrew outlined undoes 100 years of how you find a job. Like no cover letter, which is true. Brevity on your interview or on your CV, which is different. It's how do you interview on video, which is relatively new. Like everything we talked about is the evolution of interviewing, but if you're stuck in a job finding mode that is 20 years ago, you may actually become irrelevant. Between Setbinder not taking CVs, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do if I don't know where to send my resume, and my resume is 9 pages long. I guess if you're not a physician, it shouldn't be that long, or a researcher. So while the traditionalists might say that everything was opposite of what we teach you, it is so dead on, especially when there are so many applications coming in. There are too many people that focus on gaps in work history. You need to be prepared. I tell candidates when I speak to them, have a story, like be able to tell your story of why that is, because it's much more relevant in today's economic society that there are a lot of breaks in employment, but you need to be able to explain them. So I just found it interesting that it's also very true and also very different than, say, what I learned when I was at the university. So it was very great. Thank you.
Fantastic. Yeah. Satbinder, did you have a point?
Yeah, just obviously my world is kind of pretty much the opposite to your world in lots of ways.
Yeah, I noticed that when you were talking. Yeah.
But I suppose if I was thinking about kind of going for a job in your kind of sector, I suppose the question in my head is how do I shine? If you basically got a 2-page CV, essentially, no cover letter, how am I going to kind of demonstrate to you that you should give me an interview at least?
I will be honest, it's enormously difficult sometimes, particularly when volumes of applications go up, and that drives you to more towards the perfect candidate than someone who might be on on the edges for for an example. But I think with the tools available to us these days to catch my attention. So yes, there's this sort of the rather digital version and one-dimensional version of sending in the CV, but try and reach out to me and have a conversation with me, say on LinkedIn or any other sort of forms of social media. If you can catch me, I think I like that. Again, if it's relevant and because it shows you're kind of thinking about it. All right. Who do you know in the organization? Who do you know who knows someone who might be in the organization, and make some connections? It's actually good old-fashioned networking. Speaking of old school stuff, is actually still very much alive. So it's tough, but don't rely on the CV because it is a little bit of a one-dimensional tool.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess the only other points that I had to add to that as well, which I find a lot, obviously it's quite different for myself and Michelle, where we're working in an agency and we're dealing with candidates that are potentially looking at multiple opportunities with multiple businesses. And, not an overly common, but there is, it does happen. Is a misconception I think a few candidates have got, that they almost need to rewrite their CV for every job that they apply for. And, it's the same thing as a position description. I always say that it's supposed to entice, it's supposed to get the right people to attract, but it's not supposed to tell the whole story. It's not a book. It doesn't need to be you know, and that was obviously the point that you raised, Andrew, but obviously Satvinder, that is quite different for you as well, because you have to go through your, you know, internal application process and those kind of things. But even with that as well, I do believe that there is still quite a lot more of the story still to tell, which is kind of what Will was alluding to as well, that, you know, you do need to be able to expand on every single point that is on your CV, or every single point that you write down on an NHS application. You need to be a kind of expert of yourself, which is quite unusual for some people, particularly those that might not have had to interview for a long time. I think just, you know, sometimes the interviewer will be reading your CV a lot more closely than you will. And there might be stuff on there that, you know, is going to throw up a little bit of a red flag for them, and in essence for you, if you're not prepared on that as well. So, I mean, do you kind of both, does everyone see that from your perspectives as to how that kind of translates?
I think the one thing that there is a lot of common ground with what Andrew said, from my perspective, is about preparation and homework. There's an awful lot that you can find out about the organisation before you even apply, before you even done your interview. And invariably, actually, if you can kind of bring in salient points about that particular organisation or about the population it serves, you should know that. And that's and the second thing is definitely about interview preparation, essentially. And in some ways, that's even more important than anything else, because I think if you, Andrew's right, if you can be calm, if you can think about how you are going to present yourself, and you can probably predict some key questions. So I always think, you know, you're likely to get a question on, you know, why are you the best person for this job? Well, that should be straight away. You should have a ready-made, prepared answer for that. You're probably going to get asked, well, why did you apply for this job? Well, again, those are just, seems to me that whichever interview you ever go for, you should have at least those two answers fully prepared, rehearsed, and you know, and said with some commitment and passion, essentially. There's really no excuse for that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a pretty much a perfect segue, really. I mean, unfortunately, Jade's internet has died, and she's this generally tends to happen with most of my calls at the moment. Hopefully, it's not mine, but yeah. So
back in actually, Duncan.
Say again, sorry.
I did get a little sign saying "admit her back in," but
oh really? I didn't get that on mine. Sorry about that. I think she's having consistent issues, so she might be able to pop in again at the end. But in the time being, she was supposed to be speaking now about some interview preparation and kind of interview techniques and stuff like that. So I've written down a few points, but I was hoping that we could kind of all just discuss them fairly openly, because we're going that direction with the conversation anyway, and it leverages itself quite well to what Andrew was just talking about. So I mean, in terms of the preparation for an interview, I mean, hopefully all of us are pretty strong at preparing our candidates for interview. Obviously you're experts of your own businesses, which is quite different from what I do. So one thing that I guess any kind of recruiter at any level will be hopefully quite good at is stalking. So you do need to look up anyone, you know, you should have the names of the people. If you don't have the names of the people that you're interviewing with, whoever has organized the interview, you need to find that information out, because you should look them up. You should find out what their career history is. There might be some kind of, you know, points that you might be able to bring up to even just break the ice, if there's, you know, similar businesses that they've worked at, or if you've known someone who's worked at one of their previous businesses, or you might have even seen, I think, you know, one of the most valuable things is if one of the people that you're interviewing hasn't been with the business that long, that means that they were sat in your seat not too long ago, and they were in a situation where potentially they had multiple opportunities on the go as well, but they chose the business that you're now interviewing with, and that you want to find out the reasons why they chose that business, because there's some excellent information in there for you. And this is the type of stuff that if you're prepared, then you will have that kind of, you know, almost ammunition to be able to find out if this is the best environment for you as well. You know, I think there was a couple of comments earlier on about how you need to be prepared over your own profile and all that kind of stuff as well. But one of the main things that I do think you really need to be aware of is when someone says to you in an interview, do you have any questions for us? You can eradicate all of the good work that you've done in an interview setting if you turn around and say no, because there isn't, when I'm interviewing people to join my team, when I'm preparing people for interviews or anything like that, you need to show that you're interested. You need to show that you've done your research and everything like that comes with it. So it's really, really, really important that you've prepared some questions. And also as well, if you're exploring multiple opportunities, it's a very, very good way of differentiating between those businesses. If you're asking the same questions to different businesses, you want to be able to note down what the answers are and see which one aligns itself well to your values or to the technologies that you're working with, if it's a technology position, or their views on a patient-centric experience or something like that if it's specifically within healthcare. So that kind of stuff is really, really valuable, and the questions that you ask them will give you sometimes a lot more information than the questions they ask you, if that makes sense. And the only other thing sort of pre-interview that I was going to say is if you do an extensive Google search on the business and make sure that you're setting the filters that are available at the top of the Google search to get that, in the past year, how has this business appeared on news channels or like news articles. That's going to give you some really good information about potentially any kind of investment that they've got. If there's anything bad, that might appear on there as well, but generally it's all kind of business insider information, and that'll be quite good ammunition for you basically to see the direction that the business is going in as well, and hopefully going from strength to strength, which is why they're interviewing. So it's that kind of information. I find that it can be quite simple, but it's quite often not done as well, and that's some stuff that I think every candidate at every level should really be looking at. Has anyone else seen anything sort of pre-interview that they think would be valuable for everyone to know?
Yeah, I think that both Andrew and Satbinder alluded to the being prepared to the appropriate types of questions. I find that serious interviewers probably search interview questions. And so they come in with these answers to esoteric questions. What are your 3 strengths? What are your 3 weaknesses? Tell me about a time this happened and this happened, which are all necessary. But I find that people don't spend enough time on, so tell me about yourself. And they've not thought through what their story is so that they can tell it in a logical way that makes sense, especially in a management position that shows how during this presentation, you're talking about how you had increasing levels of responsibility, accountability. This is what you were successful with. And then you had this job, and then you had this opportunity. I think the questions about why did you apply here and what makes you suited for this job that Satbinder said are so unbelievably appropriate. And many people aren't ready for those. And I find that while we're in healthcare, but also part of it, kind of ancillary, are sales positions within. So sales, very, very specific skill that, show me why you're good or tell me why you're good in sales. So why did you choose a career in sales? And people often aren't ready for those kinds of answers, but they'll be prepared for silly questions because they read, Glassdoor's top 50 strangest questions, and they got ready for those, but they're not ready for the questions that are about a topic they know the most, which is themselves, and being prepared. And also you combine that with videos. So now there are increasingly number of organizations that use a video resume as their first touch point. And you have, 2 minutes to tell about yourself in front of a camera. And those don't go very well. I find that those need to be rehearsed. That's your personal elevator pitch. Any class you've taken has told you to prepare for this, but we always tend to prepare for these other questions. And I find that that's the one that is deficient for most people.
Exactly. Yeah, perfect.
So in the NHS, sorry,
go ahead.
NHS, 2 other key documents that you should probably be reading. So every organization pretty much in the NHS will have an annual report. So sets out performance, key issues for the organisation, key risks over the course of the last 12 months. So that will give you a pretty good insight in terms of where the organisation is right now. The second will be they've probably had some kind, if they're a provider organisation, they would have had a CQC report over the course of just Care Quality Commission report, again, talking about the organisation's strengths, weaknesses, where it's very good, where it needs some development. But again, it will give you a very good insight in terms of where the organisation is and some of the challenges they're faced with from a delivery perspective, which again is something that will be very, very useful for you when you are going in there and trying to pitch yourself.
Yeah, perfect. I think, yeah, all the research things that everyone mentioned there are super important, and you know, this is hopefully something that people will be able to refer back to. We're a little bit time poor at the moment, so I'm just going to go straight over to Will. So if you can, yeah, talk through your topic. Oh, sorry, you're on mute, Will. I'm going to get a T-shirt that says you're on mute the amount of times I say that.
Happen? Yeah, I think for me, what I have seen, especially coming from traditional hospital systems and now kind of on the outside of the healthcare industry on one of the outer rings, but still connected, I'm not sure that everyone still knows how many positions are available within healthcare that aren't a nurse, that aren't a doctor, because that's what is published. That's what there is a shortage of. But there are so many supporting positions that help make up or help a hospital system function that are perfectly suited for entry level or even certifications that don't take that long for people to get. And some of them may even be able to jointly work and achieve their certification at the same time in some of the positions. And so people don't think about looking towards them, but a giant hospital network, I think about one of the most recent ones that I worked for, had 60,000 employees. So they're not all nurses. There are many positions that they can try for. I think one in Mass, very much a call center position, very much a customer service, is a patient access rep. It has different names in different facilities. But these are the individuals that are either on the other end of the phone when the clients or new prospective patients are calling in. They're very often the people that are behind the desk that are checking people in. And these people, what is being looked for new to the industry is customer service skills and you know, a good work ethic. But there are then also these positions that with a little bit of training or even online certification, especially in the medical transcriptionist and medical coders field, these are positions that you can work from home, which is much more relevant today than it ever has been before. There are positions that require that are on the fringe of clinical that require not very much training. Here it's called PCT, patient care technician. These are positions that support the nurses in a clinical environment where there aren't enough nurses. So now more PCTs are necessary. And this is a 6 to 8 month course that someone can take. And the same is true, and Jade might have had some insight into this too, on the pharmacy technician. Not a clinical position, but yes, these are people still touching medications. That certification does not take very long. You could rebrand yourself quite easily and inexpensively with these types of positions. There's facilities, food services, security, environmental, which really is cleaning up. There are patient advocate positions for appropriate types of individuals. And without degrees, without certifications, we've had positions called sitters. And these are quite simply employees that sit with patients from a behavioral perspective to make sure nothing happens with them, they don't hurt themselves. And at the higher levels, you know, there's biomed engineer, there's sales positions, and sales, whether it's a hospital giant network or system, or again, these outside positions. You got devices, you have pharmacy sales. There are a lot of positions within healthcare. As you look for industries, maybe you have been furloughed or downsized, or however it was packaged by your organization, that are somewhat bulletproof against recession. Healthcare is one of them, based on the aging population. And based on the fact that people get sick no matter what. The healthcare is a sustainable industry. And if you can find positions within healthcare that support the clinical side of the business, they are equally as important as what's happening on the other side, on the clinical side. And I have found, especially when recruiting for these individuals, that we would do grassroots opportunities, high school students, trade schools, community colleges, where people just didn't know that there were opportunities for them. Many of these positions have flexible schedules, especially when you're in and around a call center. There's flexible schedules, very much suited for college students, first-time workers, that we took flyers on because we had training to prepare them. Our organization hires licensed insurance agents, life, health, property, and casualty. We also train them and get them licensed. So for us, the opportunity is someone who maybe has had some sales in their background, maybe a little bit more than retail, but not necessarily a pharmaceutical salesperson. Entry middle level is what I would call it. And we then hire them, license them, certify them, train them, and they become quite successful salespeople, earning a very good living. When perhaps 8 weeks ago, before this training that we offered started, they were either furloughed, not working, or in a much lower paying retail job. So there are a lot of positions out there is the point that I want to make. This is a self-serving point. It is my goal to help as many people possible to try and get back to work in general, but certainly after some sort of catastrophe, which maybe we're not even after yet. But it also helps us when we need those types of individuals to increase our candidate flow. So that's really the point I want to make. It's something I talk about often. Other industries may be exactly the same way, but because I've spent so much time in healthcare in general, that it is something I like to talk about and propagate so that people have this baseline understanding.
Exactly. I think that's a really good point as well. And it's, it's obviously so different to, Satbinders specifically, where, there are certain industries within healthcare and certain organizations within healthcare, which, there's a certain amount of experience, which is mandatory. And I think a lot of people, when they're looking for, like you say, a sustainable role, something which is going to be, future-proof for them and their family, that it is an organization, there are positions available where they can quite quickly, not have to go all the way back to the start of their career and go back to university or college. And they can, get these roles within these organizations, and particularly organizations that look at upskilling, their staff members and stuff like that. I think that's a really sort of key point to raise, particularly for a lot of people that are probably listening at the moment. Guys, did you have any kind of thoughts on this?
Just to kind of, I think one point that really resonated with me with what Will was saying around the health industry being, to a certain extent, recession-proof. That is so true, because if you think about the public sector in this country, every single sector is probably contracting quite rapidly, and has been since the last recession. And that's going to come around again this time around as well. But the one area that kind of stands out is health. So when people are thinking about career, I mean, I've only come to health in the last 7 years. Before that, I was in local government. If I knew now, basically, the opportunities afforded to you in health, I don't think I would have bothered with local government in the first place. I would have gone straight to health. It is, it really is plenty of opportunities in kind of health service if you can kind of get in there. it is about getting in there first and foremost before you're too senior, because then I think it becomes harder. But if you can get there in a junior level, then actually you've probably got your whole work career kind of mapped out, if that's what you basically.
Yeah, exactly.
I would imagine, at least I know in my circumstance, one of the worst dinner tables to sit around for my 6 children is my own. And most conversation leads towards, are you going to be able to get a job with that? They're all in their late teens, early 20s. So I don't think a single one happens where, have you thought about surgical technician? You can come out right now and make $55,000 a year at the 8-month certification. Like, everything that I offer up tends to be one-sided and pushed. And at least half of them have been extremely open to it. The other half have chosen military, which is extraordinary as well. So, but it's all we talk about is, are you doing what it takes to get a job? Are you thinking about what is hot right now? What is sustainable? Things that no way at 20-year-olds you're really thinking about. So let me help you think about these things.
Exactly. And I guess the final point is, Andrew, I mean, I guess, how would you respond to that kind of sitting in the middle between, working in an organization which isn't necessarily quite so entry level, but you did say there was a lot of transferables coming, from a lot of the roles that you highlighted earlier, whereby they don't necessarily require healthcare experience. How do you find this sort of future-proofness element as well? Is that something that, you're able to
well, I agree. There is with Will and Satvinder, there is a strong tailwind in healthcare technology as much as there is potentially in healthcare. And is it recession proof? Is it future proof? Certainly if our hiring pipeline is anything to go by, then yes, it is, where others are shedding and going through extreme difficulties. So it's strong. We're 2,700 people globally, right? The NHS is quite a lot bigger than that, right? So there's less corners to engage with, but we're very much involved in internships and graduates, and I think all of the recent publicity around A, COVID, and B, the civil unrest that's emerged out of the US, but spread everywhere, is about how can we give opportunity to to those that are what you might call not in those classic blue ribbon brackets, and because they can have some amazing jobs they can do with us in customer support, because they have the right personality, and qualifications don't mean aren't necessarily necessary. And I think we're looking at that, because it's the right thing to do, but it makes a whole lot of sense, to provide that sort of career progression and opportunity and springboard. And so I'm quite excited about being in that conversation, essentially.
Yeah. Definitely. And look, I mean, we're almost out of time, but that's kind of like a nice segue onto another topic that we're hoping to discuss in the future, which is all around diversity and hiring and those kind of things, which are all sort of very relevant at the moment. So hopefully we'll get something like that back in place. We've got one question from YouTube as well, which is, would you tailor or change your CV based on the company you're applying to? I don't know if anyone wants to.
We all shook our head yes. So I'm going to go out on a limb. There were times when I managed my own career counseling, resume writing business myself, and I always prepared one or more in general resumes or CVs for individuals, depending on the path that they're experienced, to allow them operations, sales, that would allow them to. However, before going in, don't lock that thing down to PDF and never look at it again. Keep it where you can look at the company and find out, especially from their mission, vision, values, the opportunities that really do apply to what you've done, and you can shape. It doesn't take long to shape your resume so that it matches the organization. You're going to have a 1 in a million chance to get it in front of a hiring manager. So you want to make sure that something about it resonates, and it's not just hashtag keywords. It's something real and substantial about the organization. If you're looking for a job, you might as well take this one extra step to tailor your resume.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say as well, because in the more senior positions in the NHS, you will probably have to go through a recruitment consultant to probably get on that kind of short list or the long list. So you are going to need a CV, despite everything else I've said. That recruitment consultant will first and foremost look at your CV. They won't look at your application form. And therefore, you do need to think about, and all the points I suppose that Andrew made and Will's point, that should be taken on board, because you will need that CV and you will need to update it depending on the organisation that you are going for. So I think all that still holds true. So you do need to think about that as well. And yes, absolutely. So I think you would always say to people, there will be something about that organisation. The reason they are recruiting for a senior post, there will be a reason, and there's something that they particularly want from that senior person. And you need to work out what that is and then major on it in your CV.
Yeah, perfect.
I think, final point for me on that is that you are what you are. You can't sort of change your history. So you can't sort of rewrite what you did at an organization specifically, necessarily. But what you can do is draw people into some key points from it. With, I talked about limiting the banners, if you like, of your responsibility and experience at the top of the CV, and not going down that for pages. But I think I do zone in on those top 6 to 8 skills, if you like, that somebody might put at the top of their CV, just in 2 or 3 word banner form. I don't say I zone in on them. I think they catch my eye. That's the version of a good CV. So I don't think perhaps it potentially might be soul destroying to rewrite your CV or think you have to rewrite your CV anytime. But there's perhaps, there's 10% that you can change sort of quite quickly based on the organization you're applying to, based on the job description, and based on you. So do that.
Absolutely. And I think, when I'm asking people just to kind of tailor their CVs for the role, I think an important thing to mention is, it doesn't take very long. You might ask someone to do something, and, I'm not belittling that you do have to actually do it, but it doesn't take very long. So, it's probably worth just investing half an hour to an hour to sort of write something out, proofread it. That's a good thing about using a recruiter as well, as you can send it to them and ask their opinion. If you're not using a recruiter, you can easily go to your peers and ask their opinion as well. And then the other thing I would mention is that there is anyone out there that maybe is feeling a little bit desperate and wanting to kind of send their CV out to a few different places. Rather than just tailoring your CV for each role and writing experience on there that maybe isn't quite as heavy in reality as what you're writing, a lot of businesses will keep your CV on file. So if it's the second time you're applying for a role and you've written something completely different on your CV than was on the first CV you submitted to them, that's going to come up, and that's going to be a bit of an issue for you as well. So I would just recommend with people that it's worth just investing the time to flesh out the experience that you do have and the experience that it says on the position description. And it's okay not to be 100% fit, because I think after 10 years in recruitment, I'm yet to come across someone that's 100% fit for a role. So there's always ways that you can flesh out your experience in the areas that you're not as strong in, and talk about the experience that you do have, which might be additional to the role. So there's lots and lots of stuff we can talk about, but look, we're pretty much out of time, or we're very out of time, because we're 10 minutes over. But there was obviously a lot that we could talk about, and I'm very, very grateful to the guys for taking the time to chat. We didn't manage to get Jade back on, but what we will do is record a conversation with Jade separately. I think Michelle is potentially going to line that one up. Yeah. And then we will we'll upload that as well in a comment on this video. But yeah, thank you guys very, very much. Thank you, Andrew, Will, Satbinder. Thank you so much for taking the time. I think it's really, really useful. And yeah, we'll get this out there, and we'll get everyone kind of watching it, and hopefully there'll be a lot of good conversations that derive off the back of it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Awkward Zoom wave. Yes.
Bye, everyone.
Bye now.
Thanks
Bye.
very much. Cheers, guys.